attorney Hiller Moore says it's quite possible Lil Boosie is connected to a string of murders. Police say Boosie is part of this web, getting a 10-year jail sentence for a third offense marijuana charge and probation violation.
He's crying and he knows from the beginning he was never guilty.
There simply is no record of what happened.
Rap has always been a world where legends rise fast and fall even faster, and some of the brightest stars end up fighting for their lives in court. We watched Young Thug get hit with charges that shook the whole industry, and then YNW Melly's case came crashing in like a storm that nobody saw coming.
And there is a distinct possibility that if convicted, he could get the death penalty.
But imagine this wild twist. What if, after everything, the world found out Melly was innocent after a death sentence was carried out? That nightmare almost became real for Boosie Badazz over 10 years ago, and the streets still talk about it like it happened yesterday.
Boosie is back in handcuffs, charged with first-degree murder.
Boosie wasn't just fighting for freedom, he was fighting for his life. First-degree murder, a possible execution, a courtroom packed with tension. That's why he relates to Melly's situation so much. He's lived that fear, breathed that pressure, and walked right up to the edge. It makes perfect sense that he stands with Melly today. So sit tight, because this story is raw, dangerous, and packed with twists. We're diving straight into the murder case that almost got Boosie sent to his grave. Boosie's path wasn't smooth. This man survived more chaos than most people see in a lifetime. He survived cancer, survived street drama, survived the kind of cases that make grown men lose sleep for years. Now he's smiling on camera, running his own label, owning a sports agency, starring in movies, and making business moves like a boss. But before all that success, his life looked more like a street war than a career. Just like YNW Melly's situation, Boosie was facing charges connected to someone close to him. Charges that could have ended everything. Melly's accused of the shooting deaths of 2 friends, and Boosie was hit with first-degree murder connected to a man tied to his own circle. It played out like a movie you'd think was too wild to be real. But this was real life. Throughout those years, Boosie dealt with challenges that would break most people. He made choices in a world full of danger, and one of those choices put him around a young hitter known as Marlo Mike. Prosecutors built their entire case around Marlo Mike's confession and even tried to use Boosie's own lyrics as proof against him. Once the DA locked in on him, the situation exploded. Suddenly, Boosie wasn't just another rapper. He was fighting a battle where losing meant death. Baton Rouge already viewed him as a warrior who'd survived pain since day one, and now the law was trying to paint him as a man too dangerous to keep alive. Here's where his criminal history kicks in. Boosie had already dealt with the streets, but everything changed in October 2008. The day police caught him slipping and set off a chain of events that would push him straight into the fight of his life. East Baton Rouge deputies pulled Boosie over, and the moment they searched that car, everything flipped upside down. They found a bag of marijuana, a cigar stuffed with weed, another unknown substance, and a firearm sitting right there in the same vehicle he was driving. That discovery hit him with charges heavy enough to shake anybody's confidence. Third offense marijuana possession and having a firearm while around a controlled substance, that combo alone could have buried his career. Even with the odds stacked, Boosie's legal team moved fast. They fought nonstop, digging into every detail until they locked down a plea deal that shocked the courtroom. Instead of facing a frightening 10-year sentence, the agreement chopped it down to 2 years, with one being mandatory. For a moment, it felt like Boosie caught a tiny break in the middle of a storm. But the judge assigned to the case wasn't playing games. He made it crystal clear that Boosie wouldn't get another slip-up, one mistake, and the hammer was coming down harder than ever. To keep him in line, the judge slapped an ankle monitor on him and placed him under strict house arrest, watching his every move like a hawk. For Boosie, that ankle monitor wasn't just a device, it was a warning.
Last time Torrance Hatch, aka Lil Boosie, was on WAFB, it was last November. He was spending time at home the night before beginning a 10-year jail sentence for a third offense marijuana charge and probation violation.
One wrong step, one moment of bad judgment, and everything would come crashing down. But the pressure got real, and unfortunately Boosie slipped. The judge found out he violated his house arrest, and the second that news hit his desk, it was over. Probation violation charges came flying in, and the courtroom didn't hesitate. Boosie was sent straight back to prison. No hesitation, no second chances. He was ordered to serve 4 years of his original 10-year sentence with the possibility of touching freedom after 2, but only if he managed to survive 5 more years of probation afterward. The consequences were stacking up fast, and life wasn't slowing down for him either. Boosie was carrying heavy responsibilities, 7 kids and another on the way, all while his world kept throwing new problems at him. Even with the stress, he kept his chin up, showing the kind of strength most people crack under. But behind that strength, a darker storm was building, and he didn't even see it coming. In early June 2010, Baton Rouge turned into a danger zone. The city was hit with a wave of violent murders and shootings that had everybody on edge.
Attorney Hiller Moore says it's quite possible Lil Boosie is connected to a string of murders. Police recently arrested 9 men for the deaths of 6 others. Police say Boosie is part of this web.
The streets were tense, and law enforcement snapped into action. Local officers, state investigators, even federal agencies teamed up to find whoever was responsible. That massive investigation led to indictment after indictment. And slowly, all arrows began pointing toward Boosie. One case in particular, the 2009 murder of Terry, pushed investigators straight to his doorstep. The pressure was rising, and trouble was closing in fast. The situation took a terrifying turn when the case led straight to someone tied to Boosie's own family circle, his child's mother's brother. Suddenly, the mounting evidence started pointing right at the rapper, and the next thing everyone knew, Boosie was staring down a first-degree murder charge tied to the tragic loss of Terry Boyd. His whole future felt like it was hanging by a single thread, and it didn't stop there. Investigators didn't just lock in on Boosie. A total of 8 other people were being connected to different parts of the case, with authorities linking multiple homicides to the wider web of suspects. It was the kind of legal disaster that could swallow a whole crew. But inside that web, one name stood out more than the rest. One person whose testimony had the power to decide Boosie's fate. That person was a young associate named Mike Loudon, widely known on the streets as Hitman Marlo Mike. He was painted as a central figure in the unfolding story, and his reputation carried the kind of chilling energy that made investigators lean in fast. People said his nickname came from the notorious TV villain Marlo Stanfield from The Wire, and that comparison alone made the streets talk even louder. Officers later described him as someone who had fallen deep into violent behavior at a young age, a person they believed had slipped into a dangerous mindset long before any arrest even happened. Over time, Marlo would go on record admitting involvement in multiple killings, describing actions that prosecutors later used to tighten their grip on the entire case. The first major claim that had the courtroom buzzing was Marlo's statement to detectives. He told them that Boosie supposedly paid him $2,800 to take out Terry Boyd. The moment that number hit the paperwork, the pressure on Boosie skyrocketed. Suddenly, the judge's eyes were locked on him like a hawk tracking a target. And based on what investigators uncovered, the tragedy that happened to Terry Boyd was devastating. So here's the breakdown. Stay ready, because the details get intense. The date was October 21st, 2009. A little after midnight, someone walked up to the front window of Terry Boyd's home on Vermilion Drive with a 9mm handgun. 6 shots exploded through the glass, tearing into the living room and leaving Terry's lifeless body stretched across the couch, blood everywhere. The scene was heartbreaking, brutal, and shocking, the kind of moment that shakes a whole neighborhood awake. This single act threw the entire city into chaos, and it became the centerpiece of the case that nearly cost Boosie his life. The wildest part? The house that got hit wasn't even Terry Boyd's place. It actually belonged to a man named Ben Hawken. That made the case even more confusing because investigators had 0 eyewitnesses, 0 DNA, 0 clear physical evidence tying anyone directly to the scene. Still, neighbors mentioned seeing 2 figures sprinting toward the train tracks right after the shots rang out, giving detectives just enough of a starting point to begin piecing things together. When the investigation pushed forward, the first major break came with the arrest of Marlo Mike, and that's when he dropped the bomb. He claimed he wasn't acting on his own. He said he was just the shooter, and that Boosie was the one who supposedly ordered the hit over a street dispute. That single statement shifted everything, pulling Boosie straight into the center of the storm. With that accusation hanging over him, Boosie soon found himself facing the darkest possibility, a potential death sentence. He ended up on death row at Angola Penitentiary, locked down almost the entire day, waiting for a trial that could decide whether he lived or died. The weight of that reality hit the whole rap world like a shockwave. Prosecutors claimed they had enough to build a narrative. They pointed to phone records, saying Marlo Mike's phone was traced to Boosie's studio just 2 hours before the murder. They mentioned a supposed confession involving the alleged payment of $2,800 for the hit, and things got even stranger. Marlo Mike had a tattoo reading "Yo Boosie, who's next?" along with lyrics connected to Boosie's songs 187 and Body Bad. That tattoo became one of the most talked about pieces of the case. But the defense wasn't folded. They fired back with their own explanation. They painted Marlo Mike as someone acting on his own, a young man who had slipped into a dangerous mental state and claimed he was hearing voices pushing him toward violence. They argued that the letter prosecutors claimed triggered the murder might not have even been real or reliable. Their goal was simple: show the court that Marlo Mike was unpredictable, unstable, and not someone whose word could be trusted to decide a man's life. Meanwhile, Boosie stayed firm. He insisted he was innocent from start to finish, refusing to admit to anything the prosecution tried to place on him. But even with his confidence, the stakes were terrifying. Nobody knew which way the verdict would swing, and one wrong turn could have ended his entire story forever. The trial drew massive attention. The public was glued to every update. The media covered every moment, and people were arguing non-stop about what the truth actually was. At the center of it all stood Marlo Mike, a teenager claiming that dark voices pushed him into deadly actions, and Boosie, a famous rapper caught in a maze of accusations and shadows that could destroy him. This case wasn't just a trial. It became one of the most intense and confusing chapters in hip-hop history, with Boosie fighting for his life while the world watched. Mike's guardian, the man who was supposed to guide and protect him, suddenly found himself trapped in a nightmare the moment his young protege confessed to taking Terry Boyd's life. But once investigators pushed deeper, it became clear Marlo Mike wasn't claiming to be some lone wolf. He said he was pushed, influenced, and instructed by two men, Michael "Ghost" Judson and Adrian Pittman. According to Boosie's defense team, Ghost had a serious grudge against Terry Boyd. The tension reportedly came from a past robbery where Boyd allegedly took $720 from him, and that personal beef became a key detail in the defense's argument. But here's where the story gets even stranger. Ghost never made it to the courtroom. He was killed on January 1st, 2010, months before the trial even started, adding a dark and mysterious twist to an already chaotic case. The final moments of Terry Boyd were heartbreaking. Picture him sitting at home just trying to watch TV and unwind when suddenly a storm of bullets tore through the window and shattered everything around him. When officers arrived, they found him lifeless on a brown leather couch, blood soaking through the cushions. It was a chilling scene, one that left the community shaken. Just a month before the tragedy, Boyd had been released after serving 5 years at Winfield Correctional Facility. His autopsy later revealed multiple substances in his system, including morphine, codeine, and marijuana, painting a complicated picture of what his final hours may have been like. Meanwhile, investigators locked onto Marlo Mike as the key that could take Boosie down. They grabbed onto every piece of evidence they could find. The alleged confession recorded inside the jail, the phone records linking Marlo to Boosie's studio around the time of the murder, and most shocking of all, that tattoo. 2 weeks after the killing, Marlo got an AK-47 inked onto his body with the words, "Yo Boosie, who's next?" carved underneath. If there was ever a tattoo that made the world stop and stare, that was the one. It became one of the most sensational and controversial pieces of evidence the prosecution had, almost like Marlo was writing his own headline. But investigators weren't satisfied with just that. They went deeper. They combed through Boosie's music like they were searching for hidden clues, checking lyrics, breaking down verses, pointing out anything that sounded even slightly connected to the case. Suddenly, the courtroom became a battleground between art and reality. One of the biggest examples was Boosie's track 187, where he raps about Marlo and mentions a car. Prosecutors tried turning creative expression into literal evidence, sparking debates everywhere about whether lyrics should ever be used to judge someone's real-life behavior. The case was turning crazier by the day, and every new detail pushed Boosie further into a dangerous corner where one wrong interpretation could take his life away. The lyric breakdown got even more intense when investigators pulled up the track where Boosie said, "Yo Marlo, he got I Monte Carlo that crap, I want that dead today. Here go the key." a bar they claim hinted at Boyd's car or some kind of reward tied to the murder. Then they shifted to the track Body Bag, where they insisted Boosie laid out a chilling storyline matching pieces of the real-life case. In the opening verse, Boosie raps, "I got lawyers on the line. 5 different kinds, 5 different crimes, same 0.45. Got a plan to turn to premise C lying. Cause they ain't going to say I did it, and I ain't going to say I did it, and I might go back and forth to court. Better bet I get acquitted. Can you dig it? Can you dig it?" Detectives treated those lyrics like they were reading a diary instead of a rap song. And things only got worse when the cops raided Boosie's home. They took hard drives packed with music files, photos, and personal content. Forensic IT specialist Constantino Dimitris went through everything and claimed he found key evidence, including the tattoo photo of Marlo Mike, the one with the AK-47 and the words, "Yo Boosie, who's next?" Dimitris then dropped another bomb. He said the songs 187 Inches and Body Bag were both recorded on the same night Terry Boyd was killed. That detail sent shockwaves through the courtroom because prosecutors used it to strengthen their argument that Boosie wasn't just rapping. They wanted the court to believe he was confessing through music. The deeper Dimitris dug, the more lyrics prosecutors tried to weaponize. They reached into Boosie's song Limelight, featuring Hurricane Chris, and read out the line, "Feelings gone, ain't no love in my body. Marlo Mike up in the back seat begging for a body." That single bar had the courtroom buzzing because it tied Marlo's name directly to violence, and prosecutors used it like fuel to push their theory even harder. And the lyrics didn't stop haunting Boosie. More bars surfaced across different songs, each one pulled out of context and treated like a confession. In another line from Limelight, the words, "Hera tried to kill me after that. I stole my name," raised eyebrows all over the room, adding more tension to an already explosive case. Then prosecutors returned to 187, quoting Boosie again, "My about business. They gonna solve the problem, 5 dead in 6 months. These is scared now. And whoever tried to play me, they dead now." Every verse they pulled made it feel like Boosie's entire discography was being flipped into evidence, turning music into a crime map. As wild as it sounds, this strategy wasn't rare. Courts across the country have been using rap lyrics to accuse artists long before this case. From Gunna to Young Thug, prosecutors have been treating music like a confession booth. They even played a clip in court from Young Thug's case, a judge referencing a lyric from one of his videos. They used bars like, "I'm prepared to take them down and I never killed anybody, but I got something to do with that body," to argue he was running a violent gang tied to the Bloods. This wasn't just about Boosie anymore. It was clear prosecutors were pushing a bigger idea, that rap lyrics shouldn't be treated like creative expression, but as potential evidence in criminal activity. In Boosie's case, every song he made turned into a weapon used against him. Every bar, every metaphor, every line flipped into something dangerous. And while the world debated whether it was fair or not, the truth was simple. Boosie's entire life was now being judged not just by the evidence, but by every word he ever put on a track. The fight over rap lyrics in court has been going on for years, and it got so serious that some of the biggest names in music stepped in. Jay-Z, Fat Joe, Big Sean, Yo Gotti, Kelly Rowland, Killer Mike, Robin Thicke, and more all signed a letter urging New York lawmakers to approve the rap music on trial bill, a law meant to stop prosecutors from twisting an artist's lyrics into courtroom evidence. But back to Boosie, because while that debate raged on, the evidence against him kept piling up. The big question hanging over his head was terrifying. Were his own songs about to become the key witnesses used to bury him, or would he walk away from the justice system's grip untouched? Nobody knew how this story would end, and the uncertainty made the whole situation even more intense. To understand just how close Boosie came to losing everything, you have to understand Baton Rouge and his connection to Marlo Mike. A few decades back, Baton Rouge was a quiet southern city, home to the state capitol and LSU. But everything flipped in the late 1960s when chaos consumed nearby New Orleans. People fled the trouble and moved into Baton Rouge, and the sudden population spike brought poverty, violence, and tension with it. What was once a calm town evolved into one of the most dangerous and troubled cities in America. But Baton Rouge wasn't like Los Angeles, where gangs controlled clear turf lines. Nah, the danger here worked differently. The neighborhoods didn't operate under strict gang claim zones. Beef could start anywhere at any moment. A grocery store, a gas station, a DMV line, random run-ins and personal grudges created enemies faster than territory ever did. It was a city where smoke could come from any direction. Boosie grew up right in the center of that environment. He came from the Roosevelt Street projects in South Baton Rouge, an area once run by a group called BBG, Bottom Boy Gorilla. Across from them, on the other side of Washington Street, was TBG, Top Boy Gorilla. And yes, the names sound wild, but they were rooted in geography. BBG sat at the bottom of the city, while TBG controlled the opposite side. Both groups were active in the streets, but the rivalry between them wasn't some clean-cut, two sides beefing forever situation. It was way more complicated. A lot of the city's violence didn't come from the classic BBG versus TBG clashes people assumed. It came from internal issues, shifting alliances, personal arguments, and situations that spiraled way out of control. In Baton Rouge, you didn't need a rival gang to get caught up. Danger lived inside every neighborhood's own walls. That chaotic backdrop shaped Boosie's world long before the fame, long before the music, and long before his murder trial ever existed. Born on November 14, 1982 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, he grew up in an environment where survival meant watching every step, trusting almost nobody, and dealing with problems as they came, whether you wanted to or not. Understanding that world is the only way to understand how Boosie and Marlo Mike ended up connected, and how their lives collided in a way that nearly pushed Boosie straight toward death row. Boosie's real name is Torrance Hatch, and even though he grew up with both parents in the house, his childhood was far from peaceful. He saw things no kid should ever have to see. His father, a street-seasoned OG, had moments of violent outbursts, and those moments hurt his mother deeply. Even with all the chaos, Boosie still remembered the good in his father, the bond they shared, the lessons they connected on, and the loyalty between father and son. His dad's presence left a mark on him, both good and bad. Growing up, Boosie was naturally drawn to the streets. It wasn't because he wanted trouble. It was because the streets were all around him, teaching him faster than any classroom ever could. He absorbed everything, the codes, the hustle, the survival skills. That knowledge shaped him early. He was raised on West Garfield Street with his mother, Connie Hatch, who worked at a school, and his father, Torrance Hatch Sr. But tragedy struck in 1997 when his father passed away. Losing him changed everything. With his father gone, Boosie's world tilted, and he had to move in with his grandmother. That's when the streets stopped being background noise. They became his reality. His neighborhood was filled with hustlers, gangsters, and people chasing quick money. Everywhere he turned, somebody was grinding to survive. And Boosie, full of determination and tired of seeing his mother struggle, felt a responsibility to step up. He wanted to help. He wanted to be the man of the family. But instead of a regular job, Boosie leaned into what his environment offered. The 9-to-5 life didn't match the pressure he was under. So he chose the only path he thought could get his family out of hardship fast, the street grind. He let go of his basketball dreams and turned to the rap game as his escape, his therapy, and his shot at something bigger. At a young age, he became fully immersed in hustling, making deals, learning the moves, and navigating a gritty world where every decision mattered. His life turned into a balancing act, the pull of the streets on one side and the hope for a better future for his family on the other. Through all the pain, stress, and survival mode living, music eventually became his safe space. It was the only thing that helped him process everything he was carrying. In the late 1990s, his cousin Young D introduced him to Baton Rouge rapper C-Lock, and that moment changed his entire destiny. Through C-Lock, Boosie entered a world that felt like it finally made sense for him. He was mentored by Young Bleed, C-Lock, and Marilyn, who helped sharpen his voice, style, and ambition. By 1998, Boosie officially joined the rap group Concentration Camp, becoming its youngest member and quickly rising as one of the rawest new voices out of Baton Rouge. That step launched the journey that would take him from the Roosevelt Street projects all the way to national fame, but also straight into the legal firestorm that almost cost him his life. The Concentration Camp lineup was stacked. Young Bleed, C-Lock, Happy Perez, Boo, Max Manelli, Javon, Lee Time, and Lucky Knuckles. When Boosie joined the group, his rise was fast. His voice, his style, his hunger, all of it made him stand out instantly, and people in Baton Rouge started paying attention quickly. Boosie made his first big appearance on C-Lock's fifth album, It's a Gamble, and he also dropped heat on the group's third studio album, Thug Brothers, both released in 2000. And when Young Bleed left the group, the spotlight naturally shifted. Suddenly, Boosie became one of the faces of Concentration Camp, standing right beside C-Lock and Max Minnelli as a rising star in the camp. At just 17 years old, Boosie dropped his debut album, Youngest of Dog Camp, under his early moniker Boosie. That project made the industry take notice, and it traveled further than he ever expected. Even legends were paying attention. One of the biggest cosigns came from the South's own icon, Pimp C, who recognized Boosie's raw potential immediately. By 2001, Boosie officially joined Trill Entertainment, the label backed by Pimp C and tied to UGK. That move changed everything for him. Under his new rap name, Lil Boosie, he released For My Thugs independently in 2002, packing the album with features from Pimp C, Young Bleed, and Webby. That same year, he also dropped his first mixtape, Boosie 2002 Advance, with contributions from Max Minnelli and C-Lock, proving he wasn't slowing down for anybody. Between 2003 and 2005, Boosie cooked up multiple collaborations with Webby. The duo was becoming one of the hottest partnerships in the region, and in 2004, Boosie teamed up with South Coast Coalition for the project Both Sides of the Track, adding even more fuel to his growing street legend. His grind paid off in January 2005 when he secured a major record deal with Warner Brothers Records, a massive step for a kid who came from Roosevelt Street with nothing but talent and a dream. This was supposed to be the turning point, the moment his life climbed into a new level of success. But Boosie's biggest enemy wasn't the industry. It was the life he came from and the world he never fully escaped. As his fame grew, so did the conflicts, the pressure, and the danger around him. The street life didn't loosen his grip just because he became famous. If anything, it tightened. That brings us to the next key figure in this story, someone whose name shook Louisiana and would become tied to Boosie forever. His name was Michael Loudon, but the streets called him Marlo Mike. His reputation ran through Baton Rouge like a warning siren. Anyone who heard his name knew trouble was close. His story wasn't just wild, it was unbelievable, terrifying, and tragic all at once. And once Marlo Mike stepped into Boosie's life, the path toward one of the most explosive murder trials in rap history was set in motion. Michael Loudon, known across Louisiana as Marlo Mike, wasn't some regular street figure. His name carried weight, fear, and mystery. People described him as unpredictable, dangerous, and capable of extreme actions. He wasn't a man folks wanted to cross, and the stories tied to him made the entire city whisper. Authorities later connected him to multiple violent incidents, including one involving Boosie's known rival, Nussie Jackson, and eventually the tragic murder of Terry Boyd. For the purpose of this story, everything here focuses strictly on the events surrounding Boyd's case and how Marlo Mike's connection to Boosie became a major part of the investigation. Boosie and Marlo came from the same area in Baton Rouge, but their lives looked very different. Marlo grew up facing harsh circumstances and extreme poverty. Seeing how difficult his situation was, Boosie stepped in and tried to help him. He looked out for him, offered guidance, and even gave him a stable place to stay when he needed it most. Over time, that bond turned into loyalty, deep loyalty. As the years went by, Marlo's reputation shifted. His presence in South Baton Rouge grew stronger, and he eventually became someone Boosie relied on, a loyal supporter who stood close and protected him during tough moments. But that role came with chaos, danger, and choices that would push both of them into a storm they never expected. Around this time, Baton Rouge was already dealing with nonstop internal conflicts. It didn't take a rival gang to start problems. Arguments, personal disputes, betrayals, and sudden confrontations kept the city tense. And in early 2009, one moment sparked a chain reaction. In April 2009, reports surfaced that Boosie had been publicly disrespected by someone snatching his chain, something people in the streets took seriously. The person tied to that incident was Marcus Thomas, connected to the BBG side of Baton Rouge. That moment hit Boosie hard, especially in a city where image and respect meant everything. Instead of backing down, Boosie leaned on people close to him, including Marlo Mike and Michael Ghost Judson, to address the situation. The tension escalated fast, and not long after, on April 25, 2009, Marcus Thomas lost his life in Baton Rouge. Even though the streets whispered nonstop, the truth was this. It was another tragic example of how quick tempers and internal beefs could ruin everything and take lives far too easily. Then something unexpected happened. A little light broke through the chaos. Boosie and Nussie, two figures whose crews had their share of tension, publicly ended their feud. The announcement shocked the city. People finally thought some peace might be coming. It felt like a rare moment of hope in a place where trouble usually showed up faster than daylight. Nobody knew that this tiny moment of peace wouldn't last, and that an even bigger storm was just around the corner. The tension between Boosie and Nussie had history behind it. Their crews clashed before, and street rumors once blamed Nussie for the deaths of people close to Boosie, including Smith, Joshua Thomas, and Kevin Henderson. But in the end, Nussie was proven innocent of those accusations. Still, old stories never fully die in Baton Rouge, and the streets kept bringing Boosie's name and Nussie's name together. Music added fuel to the tension when Nussie dropped a diss track titled Boosie Badazz, a play on Boosie's name after Boosie's own friends joked about claiming the badass title. Things heated up even more. Lyrics turned into threats, threats turned into whispers, and whispers turned into pressure from every direction. But surprisingly, interviews later confirmed the two had settled everything. Boosie and Nussie both said the feud was done. It looked like peace had finally arrived in Baton Rouge, and for a split second, people thought the city could breathe again. Then everything flipped. On February 9, 2009, Marlo Mike decided to act on his own. He confronted Nussie in his neighborhood and chose violence, despite the fact that both artists had already squashed the beef. According to what he told people later, he claimed Nussie had disrespected Boosie at a nightclub, and Marlo didn't forgive disrespect. Suddenly, the fragile peace was gone. The city was shaken again. Months passed, and then another twist hit the story. A chilling letter arrived at Angola State Prison. It warned Boosie about a possible threat involving a man named Terry Boyd, allegedly aiming at him. The letter rattled Boosie, and instead of letting fear linger, he leaned on someone he trusted, Marlo Mike. According to the accusations that later surfaced, Boosie allegedly offered Marlo $25,000 to handle the situation. What followed was the tragic death of Terry Boyd, a moment that would spiral into one of the biggest murder cases Baton Rouge had ever seen. After the incident, prosecutors claimed Boosie celebrated the revenge in the studio by dropping 2 new songs that same night. They said the timing wasn't a coincidence. They believed the music was symbolic. They pointed right back to Marlo Mike's chilling tattoo, the one reading, "Yo Boosie, who's next?" and used it as proof of the loyalty between them. Then came another claim. After Boyd's death, Marlo Mike supposedly received $2,800, not the $25,000 mentioned earlier. Prosecutors used that detail to question motivations, loyalty, and the truth behind the events. But the chaos didn't stop there. Everything escalated again. On April 1st, 2010, Marlo Mike was contacted by someone who had issues with Boosie, a man named Reginald Youngblood. He allegedly offered Marlo money to target 2 of Boosie's closest friends, Charles Nachi Matthews and Daryl Bleak Mill. The streets were already boiling, and this new move only pushed things deeper into danger. The story was becoming darker, more complicated, and harder to unravel. Every new event connected to another. Every rumor led to another twist, and every person involved seemed tied to a conflict that grew more explosive by the day. What shocked everyone the most was what came next. Marlo Mike agreed to carry out the hit, despite all the loyalty Lil Boosie had shown him since he was around 12 years old. That betrayal hit the streets like a lightning bolt. Nobody could understand how someone who had been taken in, fed, protected, and given a place to stay could turn around and step into something that dangerous. When the plan went through, the aftermath left Boosie's whole circle stunned. The damage wasn't just physical, it tore through bonds, friendships, and trust. Even Kendrick Johnson, one of Boosie's proteges and the younger brother of Lil Fat, a kid Boosie had practically raised, got pulled into the chaos. It felt like every connection around Boosie got sucked into one giant storm. And then came the twist that blew the entire case wide open. Marlo Mike decided to tell everything. No holding back, no half-truths. He wrote full statements, giving police detailed accounts about every situation he was involved in. But the wild part, he got nothing for it.
Boosie and a girlfriend, along with a former Dixon Institute guard and inmate, were also indicted on drug charges.
No deal, no protection, no reward. Instead, he ended up placing himself in even deeper legal danger. In those statements, he accused Boosie of involvement in the Terry Boyd case. That accusation is what led to Boosie being arrested. And Marlo's storytelling didn't stop there. He also helped trigger the arrest of Kendrick Johnson. Suddenly, the whole situation became a tangled knot of loyalty, betrayal, revenge, and survival. This story wasn't just crime. It wasn't just beef. It was a real look into how Baton Rouge's harsh environment mixed personal relationships, street loyalty, family lines, and pain into one explosive mess. Everyone involved was trapped in a system where revenge replaced communication and survival replaced peace. But then an unexpected person stepped forward, Terry Boyd's own sister. She spoke out boldly, saying Terry and Boosie had no issues between them. Her support confused people at first, until they learned the truth. She had a child with Boosie. She wanted her kid's father present. She didn't want her child growing up without him. Her decision wasn't easy, but it came from a place of protecting her child's future, and her voice mattered, especially during a time when emotions were at their highest. In the end, the long, messy, heartbreaking legal battle took its final turn. Lil Boosie beat the charges in 2012. The jury didn't find the evidence strong enough, and many of Marlo Mike's statements were dismissed as hearsay. They weren't legally solid, and they didn't directly apply to Boosie's case. And when the moment came for Marlo Mike to testify formally, something unbelievable happened again. He recanted everything. He backed out of every accusation, changing the course of the trial instantly. After that, Marlo Mike was sentenced to life in prison while Boosie walked out a free man. Just when the old problem seemed buried, Lit Yoshi, the nephew of Ivy, surfaced with new accusations.
I used to listen to Boosie music. I remember when I was little, uncles used to take me by Boosie's house. Yeah, that used to be my favorite rapper. I grew up off his music, off his old music, cause that new music, I still would listen to his old music, cause that gangster, that retarded. You know what I'm saying? But he do some
He claimed Boosie had something to do with the loss of his uncle Ivy. It reopened old wounds and brought old bitterness back to life, a reminder that some feuds in Baton Rouge never truly stay quiet. This whole story is tragic on every level. The truth behind what really happened may never be fully known. And sadly, the new generation of TBG and BBG seems trapped in the same cycle, repeating the same conflicts, soaking in the same tension, living through the same heartbreak their elders did. How Boosie Badazz beat the odds. As the trial moved forward, the biggest shock hit the courtroom. Marlo Mike sat on the stand and completely flipped his testimony. He said the confession he gave earlier wasn't real. He said officers threatened him. He claimed they scared him with talk of lethal injection and said they'd arrest his family if he didn't cooperate. That moment turned the entire case upside down. Boosie's freedom hung on a thread, and suddenly that thread snapped toward his side. Marlo Mike's claims took the trial into even darker territory when he said prosecutors pressured him to point the finger at Boosie, even claiming they dangled a $25,000 reward on the rapper's name during questioning. That accusation hit the courtroom like a bomb. Sergeant Chris Johnson immediately denied everything, insisting he never intimidated Marlo Mike or manipulated his statements. But Boosie's defense team wasn't letting that slide. They pushed back hard, questioning why there were no additional recordings from Marlo Mike's long interrogations. If the confession was real, why wasn't there more evidence of the conversations? Why was there only one recording and nothing else? Those missing pieces threw a shadow over the entire confession. And when Marlo's words didn't match Johnson's testimony, the whole situation started looking even stranger. Contradictions piled up, and the truth got harder to see through all the confusion. Then came the biggest twist. Marlo Mike said law enforcement coerced him into making the confession in the first place. That statement flipped the room upside down. Once again, Boosie's fate wasn't in his own hands. It was in the hands of people around him, people telling stories the court couldn't fully trust. As the trial intensified, Marlo Mike dropped another reveal. He said he wasn't just tied to Terry Boyd's death, but part of a larger criminal network that had been involved in multiple violent incidents over several months. He implied at least 6 deaths were connected to this web of chaos. Because Marlo had been younger during some of those events, prosecutors couldn't push the death penalty on him, but what his statements did do was raise even more questions about how deep this case went. and how much of it had anything to do with Boosie at all. Through all of it, Boosie stayed solid. He stood tall behind bars, refusing to break or fold, carrying himself like a hood hero who'd been fighting battles his whole life. Even locked up, he tried to protect and provide for his family. But that loyalty came with more problems. The pressure inside jail got real, and soon Boosie was hit with new accusations, claims that he tried to get drugs smuggled into the facility. And to make matters worse, someone close to him betrayed him. His child's mother reported what he'd done to authorities, turning a private moment into another legal hurdle. That betrayal cut deep, adding another layer of pain right when he was already fighting for his life. The courtroom drama was wild enough, but behind the scenes, the personal drama was just as explosive. Against every prediction, every headline, and every dark rumor floating through Baton Rouge, Boosie somehow beat death row and walked away free. The turning point came from the most unexpected person, Marlo Mike himself. Instead of testifying against Boosie, he switched up and spoke for him. He told the courtroom straight up that Boosie had nothing to do with the hit on Terry Boyd. That moment changed the whole energy in the room. On the third day of the trial, the courtroom watched two major interrogation tapes of Marlo Mike. In the first tape, he claimed that 3 people went to Terry Boyd's house the night of the shooting. In the second tape, things took another turn. He said he was the one who shot Terry Boyd. But when prosecutors questioned him again, Marlo changed his words once more. He said he didn't kill Terry Boyd, and he said Lil Boosie never paid him to do anything. Then he dropped a bomb. He claimed the DA told him they wanted Lil Boosie in the case because he was the one they wanted. That statement sent shockwaves through the courtroom. And as if that wasn't messy enough, there were also issues with the audio recordings of the interrogations. Missing parts, unclear sections, unexplained gaps. Everything looked shaky, and the jury felt it. By the end of the trial, the verdict came fast. Lil Boosie was found not guilty. The jury, 3 white women, 1 white man, 6 black women, and 2 black men, came back in less than an hour after closing statements. The decision was so quick it stunned the entire courtroom, but Boosie's defense team said they weren't surprised. They expected it. They believed the holes in the case were too big to ignore. Even after everything, Boosie didn't turn cold toward Marlo Mike. He said Marlo was like a son, and even explained that he signed as Marlo's guardian during school years. In an interview, Boosie shared that Marlo apologized to him while he was locked up and promised to try to make things right. Boosie stayed firm in his innocence the whole time. He said Marlo Mike falsely implicated him at first because he thought Boosie needed to be protected behind bars. According to Boosie, Marlo feared what Boosie might do if he was out on the streets while things were escalating, so he gave statements that weren't true. But eventually, Marlo decided to tell the truth, and that truth cleared Boosie. And Marlo wasn't the only one who stepped forward. Rochelle Boyd, Terry Boyd's sister, also testified on Boosie's behalf. She said Boosie had no connection to the crime and that her brother and Boosie had no beef at all. Her testimony added another layer to the defense, showing the case wasn't as simple as prosecutors tried to make it seem. Everything came together in one unbelievable moment. Loyalty, truth, contradictions, and raw honesty, all of it leading to Boosie walking out free while the world tried to understand how such a wild, tangled story ended the way it did. Years later, things took another wild turn when Rochelle's posts on social media suggested a completely different story. A story that didn't match what she said in court. Her new claims stirred up fresh speculation and reopened old wounds around a case that was already one of the most tangled situations Baton Rouge had ever seen. She even shared an alleged audio clip where Boosie was accused of threatening his child's mother and making disturbing statements. She mentioned phrases like, "gonna put a bag on," a phrase some people interpret as putting pressure or requesting something harsh to be done. Those allegations created a whole new layer of drama, leaving people debating what was real, what was exaggerated, and what was taken out of context. But even with all that noise, nothing changed the facts in the courtroom. Marlo Mike had retracted his confession, and prosecutors had no solid evidence linking Boosie to the murder. Their case was falling apart, and proving anything beyond speculation became nearly impossible. And just when the murder trial itself seemed heavy enough, Boosie found himself facing another legal battle: drug charges. Right after being indicted for Terry Boyd's case, Boosie was hit with 3 counts of intent to distribute narcotics, including marijuana, codeine, and cocaine. Investigators claim Boosie somehow helped get drugs into Angola prison on 2 occasions. The pressure was insane. In November 2011, facing stacked charges, Boosie entered a guilty plea on the drug case and received an 8-year prison sentence. It looked like things were only getting worse. But then came a twist nobody expected. Boosie's defense team dug deeper and exposed that the so-called drug ring was actually a setup. A situation where Boosie was manipulated into participating without fully understanding he was stepping into a trap. Once that truth came to light, the drug charges fell apart too, and the case came crashing down just like the murder accusation.
I was told that there was no physical evidence that placed him there, but that Loudon was told that by the detective who was questioning him. So a lot of questions going back and forth, and Loudon simply says he didn't do it.
Meanwhile, Marlo Mike, whose life had spiraled in a destructive direction long before the trial, was held responsible for Terry Boyd's death. In court, he shocked everyone by admitting to a long crime spree spanning more than a year, connected to multiple tragedies throughout Baton Rouge. His confessions led to indictments for 6 additional men. And because he had been younger when many of the crimes occurred, he wasn't eligible for the harshest penalty. Instead, he received a life sentence for Terry Boyd's case, with his other charges being folded into that conviction. Even as all this unfolded, another shadow hovered over Boosie's name. A completely separate murder, one he was never charged with, kept popping up in conversations, rumors, and street talk. The whispers wouldn't stop. Baton Rouge had a long memory, and people loved to connect dots even when there was no proof. The narrative kept twisting. New claims popped up online, old beefs resurfaced, and the story refused to stay buried. Every time it seemed like Boosie could finally move on, another rumor or accusation would float out of nowhere. But the truth remained the same in the eyes of the law. Boosie beat the murder charge. He beat the drug case, and the courts found him not guilty. Yet the world around him kept stirring up the past, refusing to let the story die. Boosie's name got dragged into another storm when investigators began suspecting him in the death of Baton Rouge rapper Chris Nussy Jackson. Reports claimed the FBI received information suggesting Boosie had supposedly offered $30,000 as a bounty on Nussy's head. Their feud had already been public for years, and Boosie had even recorded a diss track titled "What Goes Up Must Come Down." All of it only added layers to the mystery surrounding Boosie's public image and the chaos wrapped around Baton Rouge's rap scene. Meanwhile, Michael Loudon, Marlo Mike, found himself at the center of multiple serious murder cases. Among those tragedies was the killing of Chris Nussy Jackson, who lost his life on February 9, 2009. The charges against Loudon were horrifying. 5 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, and 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder. Marlo Mike wasn't just accused of one tragic incident. The list continued. He faced charges tied to the death of Marcus Thomas in April 2009, as well as the losses of Charles Matthews and Daryl Milton on April 1st, 2010. Even more heartbreaking was the fact that others, young men barely stepping into adulthood, were also charged in connection to those same tragedies. It showed just how deep the cycle of conflict ran through Baton Rouge. Entire futures were destroyed in situations where nobody truly won. No more slipping back into legal problems.
He's crying, and he knows from the beginning he was never guilty.
Dropping music that reflected pain, truth, and resilience. Boosie's bounce back was real. His influence kept growing. His presence in the rap world stayed strong. He evolved from the kid in the Roosevelt Street projects to a legend whose story carried weight everywhere. He completed parole by 2018, officially closing a dark chapter of his life. And during his time away, he didn't just survive prison, he improved himself. Boosie earned his GED, proving he was committed to becoming better, not bitter. Then another battle came his way, cancer. But even that didn't break him. He fought with the same fire he carried through every moment of adversity, and he walked out victorious. As he rebuilt himself, he embraced a fresh era. Boosie Badazz. He left the old label drama behind and inked a deal with Atlantic Records before branching out to build his own empire, Badazz Entertainment. It was a new chapter, a new identity, and a new mission. From the gritty streets of Baton Rouge to beating a death sentence, from betrayal and courtroom chaos to standing on stages again, from setbacks and sickness to building his own label. Boosie's story became one of the most powerful, real-life comeback arcs hip-hop has ever seen. He rose from a life full of danger, mistakes, and near destruction to become a symbol of raw resilience, a reminder that even when life tries to crush you, there's still a path forward if you stand strong and keep moving. His journey shows how complicated fame can be, how unpredictable human nature is, and how powerful redemption becomes when a person chooses to fight for their future instead of letting the past define them. The trial may be behind him, but the impact of Boosie's life story still echoes today. Loud, messy, painful, inspiring, and unforgettable. Boosie's commitment to standing on his truth, no matter how ugly things got, became a huge part of his legacy. The world watched every twist of this real-life courtroom thriller, and the story of the murder that almost got Boosie killed now sits in hip-hop history as one of the wildest sagas ever tied to music and justice. Even after everything, Boosie never switched up. He stayed true to his voice, his music, his honesty. And now, he's even talking about wanting to become a hip-hop lawyer, inspired by what he's seen while attending YNW Melly's court hearings. Melly's situation hit close to home for Boosie because it echoed the same life-or-death tension he once faced. Melly was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, accused of shooting 2 close friends from the YNW crew, Anthony Williams, YNW Sack Chaser, and Christopher Thomas Jr., YNW Juvie. Prosecutors claim Melly fired shots inside a Jeep driven by Cortland Henry, YNW Bortland, and then helped stage the scene to make it look like a drive-by. The county pushed for the death penalty, but the jury couldn't agree. The trial ended in a mistrial, a huge moment in a case that had dragged on since Melly's arrest in early 2019. Melly walked out of that courtroom the same way Boosie once did, untouched by the harshest punishment the justice system could throw at him, even though everything around him said the odds were stacked high. But unlike Boosie's case, prosecutors are not done. They plan to retry Melly, and Henry is set to face his own separate trial. The story isn't over for them. Boosie's story ain't just a headline, it's a whole cautionary tale carved into hip-hop history. His loyalty was tested, his freedom was dangled over a cliff, and his entire legacy was nearly erased in a courtroom where one wrong sentence could have ended everything. Through betrayals, accusations, chaos, and darkness, he stayed true to himself and walked out stronger than ever, bruised but unbroken. The murder that almost got Boosie killed will forever sit in the shadows of rap lore, reminding the world how fast a life can flip, how fast loyalty can crack, and how fast the system can snap its fingers around someone's neck. Even now, Boosie barely talks about Marlo Mike or Terry Boy, and that silence says it all. Some chapters hurt too deep to reopen, and stories like this, they prove something people forget. These artists aren't just trending topics, they're real people making choices that follow them forever. One wrong step can rewrite an entire life. If this saga had you locked in, trust me, you're built for more. Hit that subscribe and stay tapped in with BarzBuzz, because the streets never run out of stories, and we break them down with the heat nobody else delivers. If this saga had you shook, wait till you see what's next. You already know what it is. BarzBuzz got the real, raw, and unfiltered breakdowns. So don't forget to like, subscribe, drop a comment, and share this with someone who needs to catch up.